Welcome to another episode of that Grief Relief podcast. My name is Katie Overy and we're back in my lounge, and I haven't recorded a podcast live in my lounge for ages, which goes to show because I didn't even put my phone on silent. So that's a good start, isn't it? I'm joined this week by Leslie Darnley. Now, I've known Leslie for a long time through the fitness community. God, are we idiots? Yeah, so I've known Leslie, gosh, like a really long time, by the way. 8 years, maybe?
I'm going to say like 12.
Do you think it really is that long? I do
so,
too.
Yeah.
So on and off through the fitness community. And her lovely, lovely husband and her lovely, lovely children, although I've only met Harry probably once. Charlie I've met lots and lots of times. Leslie has been an incredible fan, supporter, listener of the podcast. And then next thing you know, she messages me out of the blue a few months ago now and said, I love the podcast and I'd really love to share my story, but I'm scared. So I was like, okay. And I don't know your story at all. Mm-hmm. Although the words you said to me were, it's quite a doozy.
Yeah.
And then you had lots of things happen at home and you had family over and then people were sick and then we had like little more lockdowns and what have you. But you're here. And it was very last minute and you messaged me and were like, I don't suppose you're free, are you? And I'm like, I can be free, Leslie, for you. So first of all, thank you. Hello, welcome to my home.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's so nice to see you with your blonde, luscious locks. Are you good?
Good.
Yeah?
Everything's good. It is funny that I think we met like 12 years ago. Yeah. And I remember it was like a fitness competition. You were super like bubbly and out there. And
me?
Yeah, I know. And it's so funny because I think at that time we were going through our grief.
Really?
I mean, I was in 2010.
Yeah, I was.
And and here we are like more than a decade later talking about it. It's just so wild.
So this is it. So I genuinely never ever knew that. So I repeat this on the podcast every single time. The first few episodes, obviously they're my family. I obviously understand the story. There are some people that I know parts of stories or know that perhaps they've lost someone or lost a job. Some people I know nothing. You are one of those. Yeah. I know nothing. I know that you've lost both of your parents. But I don't know any of the situations. So I know that you're super nervous. You're like, you've got an insatiable thirst. You're so, but just as you know, you've listened to every podcast. Whatever you want to say, you say. Whatever you don't, you don't. And if you want to stop at any time, we do the doodle-doodle-doodle-doo.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think actually from listening to the podcast and the people that came on, I was like, I have to come on.
Yeah.
Because the people that share their stories, I just feel like, oh my gosh, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Like it is a rough journey for sure. And I am very private about it because it's a downer of a topic. Like I don't get to go with my friends and talk about this. Hardly any of my friends, other than my friends back home that knew my parents, really know my story.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's not a fun topic. So.
No, I know. Yeah, you're right. And I think that kind of sense of knowing that you're not alone is important. And you said as well that you've even been writing again since listening to the podcast and having these
so actually when it all happened, I really took to writing. I started a very a private family blog, which I'll get into, but that really was a huge form of therapy for me. So just in revisiting it, I'm like, I need to write this out because I don't really, when you think about your parents, I don't really know about you, but for me, I don't think about their death.
No.
Like I think about their life and their love and the joy and the fun and the humor. Like that is what I remember. So that's why it's kind of interesting now, like all of this time to sort of talk about it again, because to talk about maybe more of the grief aspect, because my daily life isn't full of grief. It's really the love. And like now I have kids of my own and like a husband, and I mean that it just overflows. Yeah. It's just a continuum like through generations.
And do you speak about them every day, kind of like, not every day, but do you speak about them often, especially to the boys? And
it's more in my actions.
Okay.
It's not so much the words. I mean, well, having said that, I think because my mom used to tell us that she loved us like all the time. And now I understand because I've got the two little guys and like it just bursts out. Like I can't keep it in. I'm like, I love you like all the time. And my husband's like, Leslie, they know you love them. And I'm like, no, I want it to ring in their ears at night. Mom really loves us. Like it's just too much sometimes. So that's really like for me, it's also reassuring to know that that's what I remember about my parents.
Nice.
It's the love, you know, it's not like, yes, like losing them sucks. Like that part is so hard, but man, it can, I don't know. I just think if my boys grow up and feel the way I feel now, we're okay.
So, oh, what a lovely feeling.
Yeah.
And it's, again, excuse me, a common thread that goes through the episodes, as you would know, is the reason why I don't want to know these stories is because I like to ask the questions, because most people are scared to ask the questions, but you'll find out that most people that have lost a loved one just want to talk about their loved one.
Yeah.
They want to tell any story possible so that you know everything about that loved one necessarily.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I want to talk all day about their life and, you know, just the fun person that I knew. But anyway, so getting to the grief part, and then we can talk more about the relief part. But let me start from the beginning.
Yes,
I
please.
guess. So I'll take you back to, let's just rewind time. So how my parents met, in 1970s, my dad was a fighter pilot for the U.S. Air Force, and he was a very decorated, like, Air Force pilot. And so his dad was also a fighter pilot in World War II. So he went on to own a small airline in Palm Springs, California, called Sun Air. So my mom grew up in Palm Springs, California, and so she worked there. So for my dad's dad.
Okay.
So she was the cutest thing ever and was so funny and just adorable. And my grandpa just kept saying, when my son flies in, I'm going to introduce you to. He just
Was she crew?
She was doing admin stuff, I think, like making appointments, scheduling.
I really wanted her to be like this cute, like 70s Pan Am.
I know. I think that was her dream, actually. Right. She wanted to travel. Okay. So anyways, so she was working there, and my dad flew in, and of course, she's the cutest thing ever. So the rest is history. So they got married. They were together for 35 years. And I came along about 4 or 5 years later. My brother came along 4 years after that. So we grew up in Arizona, and my dad was a fighter pilot for quite some time. He was flying a lot when I was little, and then retired, and then went on to become a flight instructor for the Air Force. Okay. So then about 2 years before he passed away, let's just fast forward now. So he actually came down with prostate cancer. Oh, God. And I remember him, it was so clear in my mind, because he said, Leslie, I'm not going to the hospital for this. He said, I would rather ride my motorcycle off a cliff than go to the hospital. And I was like, whoa, okay. Like, understood, you know? Like, I get it, but at the same time, that's pretty crazy.
And to hear as well. When was this, sorry?
So this would have been like 2007, I guess. I'm going to drink a little water.
Of course, please go ahead. I'll drink my coffee at the same time.
So he went to a naturopathic clinic in Arizona, in Scottsdale, and they did alternative therapy medicine for him, and it totally worked. So it was about 5 or 6 months. He went 3 times a week, a few hours. It cost an absolute fortune because, of course, insurance doesn't cover holistic treatments, but it totally went away. So the last years of his life were pretty cool. I mean, he just kind of made the most of it. I mean, I think it was just a wake-up call. It was the first time I saw like a chink in his armor for me, you know?
Especially being a military man, you must just think, wow, this guy's my hero.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's all I ever thought, you know. And he was definitely the strong, silent type. It wasn't until after he passed away that we kind of realized he did have PTSD from his different missions and things, and losing a bunch of friends. But, and it wasn't. I know with guys with PTSD, a lot of times it can be anger and stuff like that. For him, it was not. It was just about. It was more of a withdrawal. Like, he was just a very quiet man. So. But so loving and kind, and like we could see like he sort of was just quiet in his own way, you know? So, sorry. So my brother was a chef in Germany for quite some time. And so my parents, the last trip they took was to Germany, and it was amazing. Like, my mom wanted to speak German. She learned German before she went because she wanted to speak with my brother's friends, and my brother speaks German. And so anyways, they came back, and my brother decided he was done being a chef and he wanted to join the military. So he was home. I was also home. It was in 2009, and I had been working on a cruise ship at the time, and just like, I don't know, it was really fun just to kind of travel around.
What were you doing on a cruise ship?
I was managing first an art gallery, and then later a jewelry store. So
As you do.
So random. I know. I just loved it. I grew up in the desert, and I thought, I'm just going to spend some time on the water.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so then we were home and, like just randomly, and my dad and
that's quite unusual by the sounds of it.
Yeah, like we've been traveling, like, yeah, it
Mm.
was so interesting that we were home at the time, honestly. And so I remember that morning we get a knock on the door, and I heard a man say, "Can you just go wake everybody up?" So my mom comes in and wakes us all up, and my brother comes downstairs, and I come out, and there's a policeman there, and he said, "Do you know where your dad is?" And we're like, well, yeah, he's running. Like every morning he runs 4 miles. Like he's military. Like that's what he did. Ever since I was a kid, we used to try to run with him, and we were never successful, you know? And so we're like, he's out running. And he said, well, I'm sorry to tell you. And I don't exactly know how he said it, but he's like, I'm sorry to tell you, but he's passed away. Like that. And I was like, I'm sorry. And he said, yeah, it looks like it was very sudden. We've already had the medical team come out. It wasn't a hit and run. There was no problems. He said it looks like he just died very quickly, like literally just died running.
Well, like a heart attack,
yes.
probably, was it?
Yeah, he says he's like, I can't confirm, but this does look like a heart attack. And the neighbor had found him, and like the look on your face was exactly the look on my face. It was just like, I'm sorry, like we just had like dinner and popcorn last night with him. Like,
yeah.
So,
and a very healthy man.
65. And so that was a moment that I'll never forget. It was just normal life suddenly completely changed forever. So interestingly, around the time that he had prostate cancer, they had downsized when Luke and I moved out of the house to a townhome in Arizona, in the community that we lived in. And it was a really beautiful little community. A lot of older couples kind of retired there.
Nice.
And they had a community pool and park. So my dad realized that not a lot of the neighbors knew each other. So he invited a couple neighbors to the pool on a Wednesday night for happy hour.
No way.
5 to 6
What's
p.m.
your dad's name? I'm sorry.
He's Rob.
Okay.
Robinson. Yeah.
Okay.
Robinson Van Sickle. Anyway, so he invited a couple neighbors to the pool for happy hour. A couple neighbors showed up. The following week, more neighbors showed up. The following week, a ton of neighbors showed up. It became a weekly, bi-weekly occurrence. So
amazing. All
the neighbors. So the community, there was a community that really came of this. Like, people walked each other's dogs, took each other to doctor's appointments, like knew each other's kids. I went to university not far from my parents' house, so I would come down and go to my home for a Wednesday. It was just the best evening because everyone retired there from all over the world. So it was like, ex-mayors and surgeons and people that had lived in the Middle East, and it was just such a fun time. So that was his funeral. It was a Wednesday night, happy hour at the pool. Oh. It was so wonderful. Yeah. And it was like, I'll never forget. It was like the sunset. My mom looked beautiful. The Air Force flew over with his ashes.
Oh.
I know. And my friends came home from university, and we were all there. I remember just going like, well done, Dad. Like, all right.
Yeah.
Like, is this how it works? Yeah. Like, do you just go out doing what you love?
Yeah.
It completely baffled me. Like, as sad as I was to lose him, the other part of me is just like in awe. If you're going to live like an awesome life and just like love your wife like crazy and, get to see your kids grow up and then just go out running, Yeah. I remember telling my mom, like, he just ran right into heaven. Just like, boof, one life into the next, like, I don't know. But so that's my dad's story.
And how my gosh, that's incredible. But 65 is so young. How was your mum after that? Because as you say, they've been together forever.
35 years. So they were 10 years apart. So she would have been 55. And I wish I could ask her, actually, because at the time, I know she was shaken. I know it was hard, but at the same time, I do think she saw it the way that I did too. Mm-hmm. It was one of those things where, because we had the scare, with the prostate cancer before, it was almost a relief to know that he just went out like doing something, and there was no like knowing that you're suffering from something or not knowing when you're going to die. There was none of that.
Yeah. Did the hospital ever actually say?
Yeah, it was a heart attack.
It was just a heart attack. That's crazy.
So I'm not, not to sound like that we weren't like really, really devastated, because we were, and we had to work through it all. I remember the military gave us a pamphlet that gave us the 5 steps of grief. You're going to go through denial and anger and eventually, bargaining, and then acceptance and depression. But I know that a lot of people like say like, oh, those, they aren't steps. We all know that. Like there's definitely a process, but it actually helped me.
It kind of goes like that, doesn't it?
Oh, totally.
Which is great if you're listening, but if you're watching, you'll get what I mean.
All over the board. Yeah. So I think for me, it actually just kind of gave me some words to all the feelings that I was having. I was like, okay, so yeah, I am very angry right now, and I am really sad right now. It just, I don't know. For me, it just brought a little clarity to all the crazy,
And what happened then with you and your brother following your dad's death? Because you weren't normally living at home.
No. So we stuck around. I was supposed to go back on the cruise ship in like 4 weeks. I extended it, and I stayed with my mom. And I know she was like, okay, there came a point where we had done everything we needed to do in terms of admin. And the other thing was really interesting too, that may have made this process a little easier, was we talked about death a lot growing up. Like we grew up in a Christian household where it was like, you think this life's great, wait till the next one,
That is banging.
I know. This is just the appetizer. The main course is to come, Like we really talked about death a lot. My parents gave us a death plan when I was like 15. It was like what to do when we die. And it was like steps 1 through 12. You call this lawyer. You need always order 5 copies of the original death certificate. Everyone needs an original. So it was really laid out for us. Like we knew they were going to die. Yeah. So I don't know if that's, definitely like we already have our will, but that's something I'll do when my kids are older, is like what to do when we die. Have a death plan. You go to the hospital, you have a birth plan. Like I want an epidural, I don't want an epidural. I want this, I want that. It's really, so I also think it's helpful to do when you're perfectly healthy.
And you're absolutely right. And purely because my mum's death was so sudden, my dad's wasn't. So my dad, luckily, he was around to sort out paperwork, and there was a lot to sort out. And with my mum, as you know, from listening to episode 2 with Russell, is that luckily she had a will, but there was loads of admin, loads of paperwork, and it's not to, and if you're listening, this is genuine advice. This isn't for you to avoid doing admin after your loved one has passed away. Sometimes, depending on your country and taxes and stuff, you can lose a lot of money if you haven't got those forms signed and stuff, because the government will take anything they can.
Yes.
So definitely do your research. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And it sounds awful, but people, my dad never wanted to be buried. And so, and regardless of when he knew he was going to die, it was always one of those things that we kind of knew about.
Right.
So yes.
Exactly. And my parents were the same. It's like, we want to be cremated. My mom's like, if there's anything good left of me, you need to give it to science.
Yes.
And so that was really great. It just brought clarity to a very messy situation.
How interesting.
Yeah. So I think, her parents did the same. My great-grandparents did the same. This is like I don't know if this is a generational thing, but
it's Van Sickle, generational. People pass traditions down. You've got funeral plans.
Yeah, it's nice. And not only that, but also makes you feel like you're involved. My mom would always say, like, when I die, you don't worry about me. I'm in a better place. You guys do your thing. Like, I'm going to be fine. And her parents said the same thing to her. So I think that's also helpful, just to, I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I don't think it's overly morbid. Some people don't like thinking about that.
Right.
And certainly where we live now, there are, certain cultures and religions like never speak about things like that. But why not?
Yeah.
Look at Prince Philip just recently.
I know.
He planned everything.
I know.
And it was lovely.
I know.
I like to think mine will be the same. I'd like to think my funeral will be in Windsor Castle.
So actually, yeah. So I told my husband how I want my funeral. I want it like outside at the beach. I want people to like feel the wind in their hair and know everything's okay. My husband is like, no, I want a procession. There needs to be black stallions. I'm like, this is not fair. This is not how this conversation's supposed to go. But yeah, so you're the same.
Black stallions. And he's not even English. Well, he kind of is, isn't he? But that's brilliant. Okay, right. So, but that's good. So how long then did you and your brother actually end up staying around to support Mum?
So I think I stayed around like 6 weeks, which was not long enough. I definitely wish I would have stayed longer. You'll find out why. But she she was like, guys, I'm okay now. She's like, go do your thing. I was going to be gone for about a month. It was going to be a short cruise, and she was supposed to come out with me and cruise. I was cruising around the Hawaiian Islands, and I've been doing it for months, and I loved it there. And I was like, Mom, just come out because I can get her out. I'm like, she'd never cruised before. She'd never been to Hawaii. And I was like, just come. And so that's one of my incentives for going. And my brother was going off to the military now.
Oh yeah, of course, right.
So
okay,
he went, and he was going to boot camp, so he's going to be home also relatively shortly. So I go on the cruise ship, and she's going to bring a friend with her on the cruise, and so I was booking it, and I called her and said, okay, Mom, like, give me the dates, give me all this information. And she's like, actually, Leslie, and so this had been, how long would this have been? No, I must have cruised longer. Anyway, so now we're in August. So my dad died in April, and so it must have been quite a few months longer than that. Anyway, so she said, I'm not going to come on the cruise ship. She's like, I've met somebody. And I was like, what? And I knew at the time, because she was really into dancing. She'd always done ballroom dancing.
Okay.
Even my dad was alive. So when we left, she was starting to do it more. She was entering competitions. She was just trying to do things that she loved to do that she couldn't really do before. And she was always just like a homemaker, you know? Yeah. And so the neighborhood, like I was telling you, the community really took care of her. But she was going out with them a lot and always being invited over for dinner. But I know she started to feel like kind of like a third wheel.
Okay, yeah, because everyone's in like older partnerships.
Totally. And she was also having like some of the single guys were like trying to take her out, but I think she was trying to branch out, you know, outside of the little circle. So she went online, and it was at the time like a very popular Christian like matchmaking situation. They match you on these different dimensions of your personality.
Nice.
So she's like, yeah, I met someone on here. And I'm like, okay. And so I said, okay, well, I'll meet him when I come home. She goes, I'd like to stick around here a little bit longer. So I came home and I met him briefly, and he was really nice and just cool and very like easygoing. And I could tell she was really interested in him, and did things that my dad normally wouldn't do. Like I mentioned, like he was very much the strong, silent type. This guy would kind of he wanted to travel. He's like, we'll spend 6 months in the south of France, 6 months in Arizona with your family. And he just, oh my goodness, he just made it seem like such a perfect fit for her.
Yeah. Okay, what was your initial reaction to that phone call? So you were on the cruise ship saying come out, and you found out that 4 or 5 months after your dad passed away.
Yeah. So part of me was like, just like, okay, this is too fast. But the other part of me was like, okay, cool. Like maybe she'll have a dance partner. Maybe she'll have somebody to go out to dinners with. Maybe
companionship. Because
I could tell, I didn't realize that how lonely it can be, and like, she's used to cooking for 1 million people. She's used to, having so much to do throughout the day. And now she's cooking an egg for dinner and not, so I think too, it was like, maybe there's someone that is in the same boat. So it looked okay at first, it seemed fine. And then when I came home, I had a guy friend come over to the house, and he was just hanging out with me. We cooked dinner. And I heard my mom on the phone that night upstairs just saying, oh, no, that was just a guy here for Leslie. He wasn't here for me. And I was like, oh, my God. Like, this is a really immature conversation to be having. And so,
and how old was this guy? Same age as your mom?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
And I was like mid-20s. So I was like in the dating scene. So for me, like, I'm very, I don't know, just aware, like, of conversations that you do not have. Yeah. And so she'd been with my dad since she was like 20, 21. And so I don't know. I really can't reason through this one, but she just became more and more and more involved and became more and more isolated from us. And very quickly she said, okay, I'm going to go stay with him now. And you guys, I'm going to consider putting this house in the market or renting it. So why don't you guys pack up your stuff? And so I was done on the cruise ship, and I had planned to go to Spain I planned to go to Spain to teach English and learn Spanish, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
So all of it was panning out. And she's like, Leslie, please go. I'm fine. I've met someone nice. It's time for me to kind of do my own thing now. But saying things that she would never normally say. Like she would never, we were actually homeschooled most of our life.
Okay.
She was really hands-on mom. And so for her to be like, okay, you guys, it's time for you to go. And I was like, what are you saying right now? And
you obviously, did you have a feeling that these words were being put into her mouth.
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't really understand the concept of brainwashing, but we kept saying that. We're like, she seems a bit brainwashed. So anyways,
and maybe just, sorry, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but the things that, ironically, but it just, maybe is it the fact that she's like, just kind of like fallen in like quick lust and love, and she'll do anything for this guy, and
also the fact that he seemed like he needed her. Like,
okay, interesting. Had he lost someone as well?
So he was single, and I don't actually know what happened, but she had said that he was never married, didn't have children, and he had a really rough upbringing.
Okay.
And so she was always like very active in the community, helping people all the time. I mean, she had a real servant's heart. You know, she wanted to help people. So I almost wondered if that was also, she saw him as a project, you know? And so I go to Spain, and then I pack up my stuff, and I remember having a bit of a rough conversation with her, and it really took a turn for the worse between her and I at that point, because I was like, Mom, I think he's really bad news.
And what was the time? How long had they been together? So they met in the August?
I don't know. It was like a couple months.
Really?
Yeah.
So really quick.
Yeah. And my brother thought the same. And so my mom and this guy, his name was Will, they went up, met my grandparents. My grandparents were still alive. They lived about an hour away in Arizona. So they went up, and my grandparents were like, well, he was a nice guy. He seemed really nice. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, that conversation I heard, that one conversation put me really off from him. I was like, this isn't right. He's controlling.
Did you tell your mom that you'd heard that conversation?
Yeah, I think I did. And I really made it clear I was really not happy about them being together, which pushed her further away from me. So,
gosh, it's almost like
role reversal.
Yeah.
Total role. And I remember crying. I don't really cry a lot, but I was crying at one point. I was saying, Mom, I can't get through to you. And I remember looking at her and like not seeing her behind her eyes, like just not seeing her anymore. I was like, where are you? It was so weird. It was like talking to like a teenage, Anyway, so I'm in Spain. I get an email from her just saying, you know, it was all of her emails were super friendly to me. Just like, I love you. How are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. So I'm sending you this form, and it's a form letting you get your inheritance now, and you can't come after me for any more money. I'm going to send you this lump sum, and this is it. And I was like, Mom, first of all, I don't want your money. Second of all, I don't want to sign this form. Like, what? And she's like, just do it for me. Just do it. And I could tell he was pressuring her just for us to basically, I mean, anyways, you know.
Yeah.
Very weird.
Yeah.
So I signed the form. She's like, can you please go get it notarized in Spain?
Okay.
How do I get it notarized?
Yeah.
So...
Hola. Just introducing yourself to local Spanish lawyers.
Yeah. So I sent it back, and I was like, at this point I started grieving her loss. I was like, we've lost Mom. Like, she's basically telling us I'm no longer the same, you know?
Yeah. And presumably she sent the same to your brother.
Yeah.
And had you spoken to each other kind of separately going, what the
oh
hell is
yeah,
it?
my brother and I both were really disturbed. He did a really good job of really keeping the lines of communication open between them. Like, he really tried to just be very neutral, whereas I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, okay.
And so he tried to stay on Will's good terms, you know, good terms with Will. And so I'm in Spain, and then I've got a girlfriend that comes over, and she's like, and at that point I wasn't myself. I was really not having a good time in Spain. And she said she had connections to Dubai. I applied for some jobs here, and I had a friend that was here also. So I came over to Dubai, and while I was here, I was like super alone, like as you are when you come to, at least I was, like, I didn't know anybody. I had one friend, and I was working like crazy. And then I get an email from my mom, and by this time it's like maybe June in the summer.
So you hadn't gone home between Spain and the Middle East?
No, I hadn't.
Middle East. Hadn't seen your mum for a long time?
No. We communicate a little bit through email, and it was always really sweet emails, but just very much leave me alone. You know, the underlying message. So I get an email from her, and she said, can you call me when you have a chance? And then I called her, and she said, I've left him. And she said, I filed for divorce, and so they had gotten married very quickly. Yeah. And she said, I've filed a restraining order, and I'm leaving him, and that was a huge, huge, huge mistake. And I'm like, and part of me was just like, Mom, I'm so glad. I don't know why this happened. I'm so happy to hear this. Like, I prayed you'd come around, like,
and again, what was from beginning to this phone call?
About 9 months, maybe 10 months.
Right. Okay. Blimey.
And she said, I did get married. We just had a civil ceremony. She's like, because I thought it would allow me to get everything back. Because, my dad had worked very hard throughout his life. He had a life savings. We, the insurance after he died, it was all with our financial advisor, who was a very, very close family friend of ours. And so my mom, a few months before, had gone into our financial advisor with Will, and they had transferred all the money out. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Into Will's account.
Oh
and
my God.
My financial advisor called me and just said, he was all cuss words, like, what just happened? Your mom just came in with this guy. They want to transfer everything out. And that's when I was like, oh, yeah. I could say so many curse words, but I will spare it.
You're a good Christian girl. I'll have nothing like that out of you. Thank you very much.
Oh, you will. Don't worry.
My gosh. Okay.
I know. It's a heart-wrenching story. It is. So, So when she said she had left him and that she'd married him to try to get everything back, and she said, I am just so sorry. And I could tell she was broken, just mentally broken. And so she went, and she was staying in our parents' townhome. At the time, she had rented it out to a really nice older couple that was living there, and so they were good friends. So she was staying there. There was rooms enough for her to stay there.
Okay.
So she was staying there, and I talked to the neighbor, and she said, your mom isn't doing well mentally. She's like, she is crying a lot, because when I talked to her on the phone, she sounded very strong.
Yeah, of course.
So I was like, oh, okay. I've got to get home. Like, and I called her again, and she emailed me again, and she just said, listen, I love you. I love you. I love you. I'm so sorry for everything I've caused. I'm going to make everything right. And that was the last email I got from her. And so, I called the neighbor the next day, and she said, actually, your mom went back to get some things at the house. And I was like, oh, and I just thought, he's going to kill her. Like, there's no way. And so I get an email, and we don't hear from her. And I get an email from my grandma the next day. She said, can you call me when you wake up? And she said, the policeman just arrived at the door, and your mom is dead. She was shot in the shower.
Oh my God.
But it looks like suicide. So, and it's with her own gun. Yeah. So that was the culmination of so much anguish and like just mental. She was just so mentally broken, and I don't know if she did it. I don't know if he did it. I don't know if he made her do it. I don't know what happened. The police said it looks like suicide. They, of course, took evidence. They took his clothes. They took the blood splatter. They took, it was a crime scene. And they said, by the time I made it home, I sat down with the policeman, and, the people that were there, came after, and he said, it looks like suicide. So there was no criminal case against him. So we had to open a civil case against him, which we didn't have much to go on because, she willingly went with him. She willingly married him. She willingly went back to him. So my brother and I went home. We hired, of course, a lawyer for this civil suit, and it was a hard time. Those months were rough because, we had to sit in a room with him and listen to the questioning. And of course he doesn't, a typical narcissistic psychopath, they have no remorse. They have no empathy. They really don't care.
And he doesn't see he's done anything wrong.
No. Literally, they want to own you and everything you have. That is their goal. And that's what he did. So for him, he just didn't care. Yeah. So that situation was rough, and we did all we could. We spent tens of thousands of dollars in a matter of months. I didn't know how litigation works. It takes years. It takes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and you may not win. So we settled out of court. Long story short, we did. It was long. First we, the lawyers, they had, because my mom had met a friend of his that gave us a lot of information, and so they passed on a lot of information about his ex-girlfriend. So we questioned the ex-girlfriends.
Okay.
Ex-girlfriends, some of them refused to talk about him. One of them said, she said, I wouldn't put it past him killing her.
Yeah. God.
that was a really rough time. And I think she was just a sheep to a wolf, you know? I mean, he just obliterated her, and it's so sad, like, having known her and how, like, innocent and caring and kind and joyful she was, and just to have her light snuffed out like that, you know?
I mean, yeah, by the sounds of it, purely from what I've heard, it sounds like he just almost wore her down.
Yeah, completely.
Just mentally,
Yeah.
like, because the woman you knew 9-10 months prior would, I guess, I mean, you never know, but you would never have expected her to step into a shower and take her own life.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, the policeman asked that question. He's like, was she ever depressed? Did she ever have depression? And she never did. I mean, she was so happy, and would often say, like, I'm so happy. I mean, that was just her thing. Like, she was just the cutest thing. And abusers know how to do this.
Yeah.
They can take a perfectly wonderful person and turn them into something where you can't recognize them. And they don't know themselves.
No.
You know?
And do you think, I guess, obviously, because she was clearly still grieving your dad.
Right, of course, yeah.
She was extremely vulnerable.
Right.
Excuse me. Do you think that he preyed on her?
100%.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. So,
Like, almost sought her out?
yeah, so she's not the first, and she's not the last. So I do need to, like, flip the script a little bit, because as hard as it is to, like, tell this story, and this is why I don't talk about it a lot, because there is a lot of shame, and, like, you know, I feel like there's so many times I could have changed this scenario, you know, and so it's easy for me just to be like, had I not done this, had I not left, had I not had this conversation with her, you know, like, there's so many things where
you can't do
right,
that.
when someone dies, there's 1,000 what ifs,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, you know, that's a really hard road to go down. And so I remember driving down Shakeside Road, like, right after I'd found out that she had died, and just screaming at her and just being like, I knew this was going to happen. I told you this was going to happen. How could I let this happen? You know, and just so much just, you know, remorse and just self-loathing. And then about a couple days later, I had a whole different conversation with her, and it was just like, you're human, I'm human. We made some catastrophic mistakes, and, like, I love you. I have to pay tribute to you and live a great life. I cannot live a life of anger and hatred, you know? And I just kept having this, like, vision in my head of a torch. Like, maybe it's just a normal grief analogy when someone dies, but I was like, she ran the race well, and she died terribly, and she dropped the torch. I'm like, I am going to pick up this torch and run this life well, and I'm going to go out well. You know, I'm like, Mom, I have to pay tribute to you, and, like, all the love and joy and fun, and just live a great life. Like, I cannot. And, you know, I think after she died, one of the biggest issues I had with, I think, the grief and the sorrow were the vulnerable, like, the 2 a.m. hour, like 3 a.m. when you're not busy, and when you're just, like, at your most vulnerable, and, like, you don't have anything to do to stay busy. That was when I was writing, and that's when I would blog, and just, I mean, it would be like a whirlwind of thoughts in my head, and I had to just get it out. And so just allowing, and sometimes getting it out, it would just be a paragraph. And I'm like, phew, it's out, you know? And so that was really good for me to do. And one book I loved was A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis.
Okay.
And he talks about the mad midnight.
As in C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis.
I love him.
Wow. Okay.
So he suffered the loss of his beloved wife, Joy, and he wrote a journal in the mad midnight moments, is what he called it. And basically just working through his grief. And it is a work of art. I mean, the anguish that he went through, and the questioning of his faith, and the questioning of God, and everything he knew that he thought he knew. It's just super interesting, because it put to words things I couldn't, you know? Anyways, I related to him on that, like waking up the early hours of the morning and just needing to get it out. So yeah, that's a really good book. But I just knew, like, I couldn't, your mind wants to go down some really dark paths. And I didn't want to think about like how she died, because I'll never know. I'll never have that closure. You know, the closure has to come with just realizing that, man, like the way I feel about her is just love. Like that's it's a continuum, you know. It's not, there isn't closure. I'll never know. We couldn't put him in jail. We couldn't get him back. You know, in the movies, you get vengeance. The family gets to like obliterate the awful human. But you know, in real life, it's messy.
And what about your brother? Like, how was his reactions to all of this?
He was amazing. I mean, he was super strong, and you know, we sat together in the depositions, and you know, had to hear the same stuff, and we would just leave and just be in shock and just, I don't know. I mean, we were just in it together. You know, it was just a matter of, I mean, just sorting through it. And I think too, the financial advisor that was really close friends with our family, like they really took us in like adoptive kids. I mean, they gave us a home and cars and helped us, and just a lot of people just kind of rallied around us. And I think it was interesting because going back to the community again, like that was also where we had a memorial for my mom, was with the community, and all the questions, you know, were just like, how are we going to get him? What can get this guy? And you know, it's a hard situation because you don't get that vengeance. You don't get that closure.
Yeah,
so
life isn't a movie, is
it's
it?
It's not. And
so where is Will?
So
what happened after that?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I don't know.
I mean,
no
we
idea.
Don't care.
Yeah,
I'm aware of that. But I mean, directly after that, and obviously you said you settled out of court, whatever.
Right.
This is perhaps a leading question.
Okay.
And one that can or cannot be used as evidence in a court against you. But like, was there a time where when you settled out of court, you were just like, do you know what? I'm just going to go and do something myself.
Of course. Oh my God. Like that's where, Nietzsche says that beware in fighting the monster, you don't become a monster yourself. And for the longer you look into the abyss, the more the abyss looks into you. And I felt that. I was like, oh my gosh, like if I continue on through this like pathway, yeah, of course. Like I knew exactly where he lived. I knew exactly where, you know, but I just kept thinking, okay, my parents would not be proud of that.
Yeah.
I will not be proud of this. Like I have to just live a great life. And I was 29 at the time. My brother must have been 25. And it was just rough. But so I came back to Dubai, and around that time, actually, just to backtrack, one other really weird thing about it was my mom died on my grandpa's birthday, August 10th. And he was alive, and she adored him.
So why? So that's another question.
Yeah.
She wouldn't have done that.
No.
Right.
So,
all this circumstantial kind of stuff.
It was so much. I mean, he was a hoarder. He hoarded guns. He hoarded ammunition. They had bought a big house together. So when we settled out of court, we went back to the house because we were going to sell the house. And one of the things that was really precious to me was knowing that he had all my mom's jewelry. And he had all my jewelry that I had gotten over the years from dads and ex-boyfriends, whatever. And I wanted the precious things. I didn't want him to have those things, you know, let alone like everything else. And so we went back to the house, and he had kind of strewn jewelry all across the kitchen counter. And it was like garage sale garbage. And I was going through it, and I was like, oh my God, you know. And so when we settled out of court, I had said, like, if we're settling, I want the jewelry back. Like that needs to be. So a few pieces were delivered to the lawyer's office, and I was like, there's a lot missing. They're like, well, it's in the house. I don't know. It was messy. I go back to the house, and I find her engagement ring in the midst of like some serious junk. Like he had missed it. He didn't know it was there. So I was just so grateful to find that and just like have those pieces. And oh my God, it's just horrible. But so anyways, around that time, I came back to Dubai, and I had met a local Emirati woman who also was having a tough family situation. And I met her because I was working in jewelry here in Dubai. I was selling her some nice pieces, and we became really good friends. And pretty soon she had asked, like, do you want to come work for me as my personal assistant? And we just kind of shared our, family trials together and became really good friends. And I worked for her, that year, and it was such a wonderful year.
Yeah, I remember some of your stories.
Yeah,
it was amazing. And the traveling you did was awesome.
And we got to go to India and help build a school there. We went to Seychelles and helped with an orphanage there, and it was just such an enriching, wonderful year. And
if you don't know, if you are listening, Emirati being local to the UAE, which means she would have been a Muslim woman,
right? And
you said you grew up in a Christian household, so to again almost just strip everything of cultural background, religious beliefs, backgrounds, whatever, and to be able to bond in that kind of grief, I suppose.
We really, and it was also just the aspect of like focusing on like how, I don't want to sound like brusque or crass, but just I didn't really focus so much on the aspect of losing my mom as much as I just loved her, and it was the same thing for her. Like we just connected over the fact that like, as awful as life is, it's also beautiful. And it's also so, I don't know, like I just felt like around that time, I didn't realize with grief, there's also so much beauty that happens at the same time.
Yeah.
That is just a weird sensation. Like there's a huge juxtaposition there that this is the worst time of my life. And yet all of these people are loving and kind. And so, I don't know. I found that odd. Honestly, when something bad happens, you expect everything to be horrible.
Yeah, of course. And again, a common theme, and as you know, because you messaged me after listening to episode 16 with Candy, is phenomenal episode in terms of, okay, how do you harness this awful, negative, sad, even anger and all this energy and just be like, do you know what? I'm going to live my life to the fullest. And again, I say this all the time. That's not carpe diem, I'm going to skydive every day. It's just like, do you know what? You can go down some dark paths.
Yeah.
But you have to... And you weren't you weren't married or a mom or anything at this point.
Oh, my Lord. I was so alone. I mean, we're talking like so alone. And fortunately, like I know you can be alone and not feel alone.
Yeah.
And I never did. Like it was just a matter of, I read a lot. I wrote a lot. I went to church in Dubai, to an awesome South African church, and just kind of let it all out. And
you can also be surrounded by people and be incredibly alone as well.
Totally. Absolutely.
That's the big thing. You just touched on the church as well. And I don't like to dive too deep into religion for obvious reasons, really, because everyone's got different beliefs and what have you. But going back to the lady you worked with, her being, her religion is Islam, yours Christianity. Did you ever discuss your beliefs and religions? And for me, it's a case of, okay, at what point do you question your faith because of the things that have happened to you?
Right.
Did you have these big, like, in-depth conversations? I can imagine these really in-depth.
It was more just really respecting each other. And so, she would pray, and wherever we were, when it was prayer time, she would pray. And I just found it to be beautiful. And then I would pray, and it was just a really lovely, just a calm time that I really needed.
Okay.
It was just a peaceful experience. And I'm just grateful for that time, And then towards the end of that year, because of my brother being in the military, I was introduced to CrossFit, and I thought it was just a military thing. I didn't know it was like everybody thing.
CrossFit.
Yeah. And I thought it was a Navy SEAL thing. And so I was looking for CrossFit in Dubai and came across Star International School with Candace and Ben. And they had rented a little classroom, dusty little classroom.
Oh my God, they had wooden plates on the bars. It was amazing. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was just the funniest little CrossFit, but it was the best. It was just great. So, there was a cute guy coming in after the classes for private lessons with Ben. And I was like, who's the cute guy after class, And he started joining the class because he got stronger. He built up his confidence. And and he was just so funny. This is Chris, obviously.
Well, funny is questionable.
He said something that made me laugh so hard. It was with Brian.
Yes.
Yeah. And he was doing muscle ups or pull ups or something. And he's so tall and so his feet.
Brian, 6'10",
right. And his feet are so long. And so I remember Chris just being flapping his feet. If he just flaps, he could do way more. I just went home and just laughed about it forever. I'm like, he's so adorable. You know, I love him. I want to have his babies. And Brian just flaps his feet.
So how long, because I love the fact that and I always remember you and Chris meeting at the box, and anything like that, you're like, oh my God, you see Lizzie and Chris are going out, or any other couples that get together.
Totally.
You're like, ooh.
Yeah, I know. That was such a fun time. So, so we fell in love and got married, and we got married in Hawaii.
Yes, my goodness, I remember the photos.
It was really sweet. And
Leslie's got photos, by the way, underwater photos where she, is it dived or dove? Whatever.
Either way, I think.
She was swimming underwater in her wedding dress, and these photos are absolutely beautiful. You know, especially now, because it wasn't a big thing back then, Instagram and such. Now, if you see these pictures on Instagram, you're like, oh my God, and I'm like, I know her. She's my friend. Very quickly, how long after your mum passing away did you meet Chris? Because I'm wondering, was there any trauma bonding, for want of another word?
It could have been. I mean, I lost my mom in 2010, on August 10th, 2010. And so I met him in 2011. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, there's no way to know, really.
No.
I just thought he was adorable. Yeah. And so funny. And I just...
Yeah, maybe your judgment was misted. Maybe.
He's still adorable.
Full disclaimer, I love Chris, by the way. I played tennis with Chris and he's amazing. But
I find him hilarious.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's good. Yeah, as you say, you will never ever know.
Right.
I mean, unless something else happens. But I mean, as it stands, you don't think that there was a need to be looked after. Or...
No, well, very quickly. I mean, the thing is, I had my guard up. And I really had no intention of getting married or having children. It was never anything I really wanted to do. I love kids. I got my master's in education. I thought I want to just work with children my whole life. But then I quickly got the travel bug and decided that was going to take priority for the meantime. And then, but I don't know. I met him, and then he was like, do you want to come home? We met in like October, or kind of got together in October. And then by November, he's like, do you want to come home with me for Christmas? And I was like, I don't have any plans for Christmas. Like, I had nobody. I got nothing, you know? And because he was so open to inviting me to meet all of his friends and all of his family, it was a good sign for me, you know? Whereas I had just come from a situation that was so closed, and, you know, that you understand. So I just, I went home, and I loved his family and I loved his friends, and it just worked, you know?
And where was home for him?
England.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Because I know he's South African.
He was born there and then went to England when he was 6 or 7. Oh. So he really grew up in England, but went back to South Africa.
Parents are
his mom's South African. His dad was English.
Oh, fine. Yeah. Right. Okay. Because I'm always really confused. You know, when the rugby comes around, and I never really know where his loyalties lie. Yeah, and again, if you're listening from outside the UAE, we're obviously a huge expat community. So for you to meet this guy from a totally different country, although you're both Western, super, different cultures and stuff, to then go, do you know what? Yeah, I am gonna go. 2 months later, like, why not?
Right.
And just do it.
Yeah.
That's a big jump, and I think that obviously says a lot.
Yeah, and it was just a lot of fun. And so we got married. I think it was like 2 years later. Let me think about that. 2003. No, a year later we had Charlie.
Yeah.
And so just to go back to the story, I guess. So Charlie was 8 months old, and I get a Facebook message from my brother saying, he forwarded me a Facebook message from a girl named Calories in New York asking about Will. And she left her phone number, and she said, can you please call me? And so he's like, do you want to call her? And I'm like, yeah, I'll call her. So I called her, and she said, I'm so sorry to bother you about this, but she said, I live in New York. I'm a lawyer here, and my very good friend works for the FBI, and I asked for her to do a background check on Will. Can you give me some information about him? Because my mom is dating this guy named Will.
Oh my God.
And she isn't talking to us anymore. And she said, we are a Puerto Rican, New York family. We're very close. 3 sisters. My parents are divorced. It's very, very weird for her to be acting like this right now.
Oh my God.
And she said, so when I asked my friend from the FBI, a court case with your brother's name came up. I contacted him on Facebook. That's how that happened. So she said, can you just give me any information? I said, I have some really bad news for you. So I, of course, told her the entire story, and I sent her the court case. Her mom was in Puerto Rico at the time with Will, and she said, I can't get a hold of her. I can't get through to her. I'm going to have to get on a flight and fly to Puerto Rico and try to get my mom alone and talk to her about this and present this to her in a way that she'll understand without it looking like, without pushing her further away. And so she managed it. She got to Puerto Rico. She got her mom alone. She showed her all of the information. And they contacted the police. They were able to arrest him. And I think that they held him for like 10 days or something and then deported him. But that was the last I've heard of him.
Oh, my God.
But that was really crazy. And it was disheartening too, because I contacted her like 6 months after that. And I just want to know how your mom is. How is she doing? She's like, you know what? She's doing all right. She's met somebody else. She's doing okay. But she's like, Leslie, it really disturbed me. Like, she often talked about him, like how much she missed him, like knowing everything she knew. Like, I just don't understand like how he got, you know, I mean, like literally. And after reading like more books about psychopaths and that sort of a thing, like they are so charismatic and they really have no personality of their own. They really become the person they're with. I mean, they can just read the situation and just, you know, lure them in, and then pretty soon the dark side shows, you know, but it can take time. And by that time, the person's already so invested and ruined, and, you know, but it's increments. It's very, very small abuses over time.
Yeah. And that's, I wish I could find a better word for it, but that's the skill that they have. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, and she'd already start buying him things. Yeah.
Wow. When you spoke to this lady, you obviously knew that something was happening because she'd said about this will. Were you nervous, obviously, having, you know, you're ultimately telling someone your mum is in danger?
Yeah. My heart was racing. It was racing calling her. It was racing, you know, until I knew she got to Puerto Rico. It was the whole situation. I was like, oh my God. Like, and at the same time, I was like, please let me be able to help somebody else. Like, I can't help every woman he meets, but at least this one, you know, so. And
so when was that? 2011? That's the last you've heard?
It was 2014, because Charlie was little, Yeah,
you said after Charlie was born. Do you want some more water? I'll get you some more water.
I do.
Told you about that insatiable thirst, didn't I? Hold on. This is what we're going. We've got more water. We're back in the room. Everything's fine. Thank you for sharing that story, because I know it can't be easy, and I know it must be. Do you ever see? This is what happens. My brain, and I just keep asking questions. Do you ever try and like look him up, or do you just go, nah, I'm not interested in anything?
I did in the beginning, but I mean, I don't think I tried to look him up. I just tried to. No, I mean, there's nothing. The thing is, I don't even know if that's his real name. I don't know if he's changed his name. I have no idea. Like, it's just kind of a fruitless,
in my mind,
not time well spent, you know.
I know, and this is awful, because in my mind I'm like, I just really want to one day search for his name and it be an obituary.
Yeah. One day it will be.
And we can only hope. I mean, no offense, Will. I don't know you, but you don't sound like a stand-up guy. But yeah, no, I really appreciate you telling me the story, because I had no idea. So yeah, my mum passed away in the May of 2010. So we clearly were going through all of this together. Not that you can compare grief or death or whatever, but obviously yours was very shocking. And you just kind of, and this is going to sound really, I hate it. I hate being this person, but the fact that we met and through the fitness community and we were both grieving, but you know what? Fitness and sport and things like that just kind of gets you through everything.
Oh my gosh, totally. Movement. Just moving, just keeping things moving. You know, you don't want to like stagnate in grief.
No, and it's really weird. And just for me, I was never into fitness or the gym back in the UK, and it was only when I moved here, and it was, and I forget how I even met Candice, but same thing. Like, Oh, it was Duplays.
Oh, yeah.
Of course it was.
Yeah.
It was through Duplays and Brian. And of course, right,
Yeah.
that's how I got into it. But yeah, and then just to kind of meet all these new people, and I'm like, oh, God, I'm just doing like fitness stuff all the time. But
Totally.
it kind of took my mind away from everything.
Oh my gosh, I think it's the best.
And
And like
happy
now I'm into
days.
Pilates, but I totally love it.
Pilates
It's
is really difficult.
I know, but just moving and breathing, and I mean even just walking and I think being in nature, exercising in nature, I think is just so healing and beneficial. Yeah.
That's amazing. You're saying about Pilates. When you go to a Pilates class and you realize how weak your core actually is, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I thought I was okay, but then
It's brutal.
Okay, fine. As you know, as you're a big fan
Yes.
of the podcast, I ask all my guests for either an Instagram account or another podcast that might not even be related to your grief, your story, or nothing, but you just love it.
Yeah.
What do you have?
So
for
I
me?
am so not Instagram very much. Like me and social media, I just don't go on it very much. Like, anyways, but podcasts I love, and I really enjoy Tim Ferriss's podcast.
Tim Ferriss.
Yes. Do you not know him?
No, but what's really weird was I used to work with a guy called Tim and a guy called Farris on a breakfast show together. Tim and Farris.
Well,
That's really odd.
put it together. No, this guy's so great.
Okay.
And he also has another side podcast called Tribe of Mentors.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm just like hungry for nuggets of wisdom because like I don't have my parents here, but man, just the insight, because he interviews the very best in every field. And so they just give, I mean, their stories are amazing, and I always learn something. So
Really?
Tim Ferriss, yeah.
Tim Farris.
Yeah.
And is that, if we just search that in podcast?
Oh,
we'll
girl,
find it?
you will find everything. I mean, he's written so many books, and like, yeah,
Okay.
he's awesome.
Oh,
So,
we like it.
but great podcast, yeah.
Good. I like it. I like good recommendations. It's interesting you say about learning nuggets of information because your parents aren't around, and it's, you know, those things that you always carry with you that like, oh, my mum used to say this, or my
Yeah.
dad used to say this all the time. But yeah, you don't think about continually learning it for yourself because you pass it down to your children.
Totally.
I pass it down to my nephews.
Yeah.
You know, even now my nephew will say something like, oh, Granddad Steve said blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, that's great. That's like a
know.
legacy.
Yeah. I know.
And as you say, to especially because of how you know your mum passed away and everything, is just for you to continue on for your children and be like, do you know what, I'm going to celebrate them, celebrate their life.
And you know, it's funny
happy
because actually
days.
something my mom used to say too, like I would run out the door like for salsa dancing and just leave like a mess in my wake. And I remember my mom and just saying, Mom, I would say like, I'll pay you back. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I'll get you back. She's like, Leslie, you cannot pay me back. You got to do it for somebody else. Like she would say that all the time. Can't pay me back. You got to do it for somebody else. And so like, I think about that all the time with my kiddos. I'm like, Mom, I'm doing it for somebody else. You know?
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah, it's just, you know, you can't really pay your parents back, like,
No.
ever.
Ever.
I mean,
You can only do them proud.
yeah.
And that's, you know, that's the big thing. And who are your inspirations and who do you want to do proud? And it's one of those things where people are like, of course they're with you all the time and they can see everything you're doing,
Yeah.
and they can see the boys and everything, but you're just like, I really wish they could have seen
Yeah.
this because I was really good that day or whatever.
Yeah, I'm always talking to her. I'm like, Mom, you're missing this.
Yeah.
Like, they're the cutest grandbabies.
Oh.
How are you not here?
Yeah.
You know, like she would have loved it. But, you know, like, yeah, just that conversation in your head. It is a continuous conversation, but.
Do you think I guess you don't know how to answer this question, but do you think you're through your grief?
So I think, you know, this is really what I found with grief, is that the way that I live my life is going to continue on with my kids. Like, that's really what I've gathered from my parents. Like, the way they live their life and the love they poured into us, like, but the grief aspect, like, I'm always going to be sad they're gone. But I try to think happy thoughts. Not to sound like Tinkerbell, but it really helps, you know, just think happy thoughts, you know, like, of course, like, the grief is hard, but man, just, you know, like, I remember so clearly, like, just belly laughing at the dinner table with my mom. Like, I want to have that with my kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I just think about, I try not to go down the heavier path. I feel like in any situation in life, like, you can make it worse or you can make it just a little bit easier. And so I just try to make it a little easier, you know? I just try to control my thoughts. And it's not about pushing it aside or, you know, ignoring it. It's just like, no, I don't have to think those thoughts. You know, I can think about how lucky I am. to have had parents and to have had them for so long. Like I was a young adult. Like I didn't lose them when I was 10 or 14 or, like I enjoyed them for many years, and I was also with them a lot. So anyways, I'm a lucky girl,
Aww,
yeah.
Take those pluses.
Yeah.
How amazing that you can tell the story that you have and then still say, I'm a lucky girl.
Yeah.
As always, as you can hear, Leslie and I are not experts. We just talk randomly for an hour. But I say it every episode, if you have been affected by anything that we've spoken about, anything that Leslie has spoken about in her story, please reach out. If we can't help you, because we probably can't, but if we can't help you, we can put you in, point you in the right direction of people that can. Or ultimately, if you just want to outpour to us, I can connect you with Leslie, potentially slide into her DMs that she never checks. Yeah. But genuinely, if you have been affected, or if you think you know anyone that is having suicidal thoughts, please reach out, and I can certainly connect you with the right people. Like, subscribe, all that crap, because I hate saying it after it just seems so pointless, and after the subjects that I talk about.
Yeah, but it's so good. Like, subscribe,
follow, give us a review, and all of that jazz. Leslie Darnley, you're a beautiful person. Thank you so much for telling your story and sharing it and drinking all of the water in my house.
And thanks for having me. And thanks for listening. It's not easy. You're doing a great job.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. And I will speak to you very soon.
Yeah, cool.
See you.
All right, bye.
Bye.